All right, so hope everybody's doing well. I want to just say I cannot believe how fast this month has gotten away from me. I think between Halloween, my grandson had his birthday, and so my daughter and he were in town, and just the pretty much the election nonsense is wearing me out, worrying about it. I finally just quit paying attention. But anyway, it just seems like the last 3 or 4 weeks just went by and I didn't even realize it. So where we are at in the semester is we don't have enough time to really do multiple drawings, but it's a long time for a drawing. So I realized that we've got to kind of figure out a way to make the best use of the next 3 weeks. I'm going to have you all turn in your drawings the day I'm going to open it up so anytime the week of finals between Monday and Wednesday night, you can turn in your final drawing. So if some of y'all have other things to work on, that gives you some leadway of how to do it. What I want you to do though, is that we're going to break this up into a couple of steps. By Monday, I want you to make your statement on art, what you think is a good painting, and how the artist that you chose as your sibling influences your ideas about a good drawing. Then what I want to do is clarify what I consider a good way to make thumbnails. I realize that a lot of you have misunderstood thumbnails as just 10 different ideas, and sometimes that's what I do. If I just don't have an idea, sometimes I just start sketching in my sketchbook or on random sheets of paper to come up with the idea. But once you have an idea, then you want to start thinking about how is the best presentation that I can make for that idea. You know, angle of view is important more than anything else, because that becomes your drawing and you are your first audience, but then everybody else is also your audience. So you want to think about that view that we have sets the whole mood and the idea of that drawing. So I want you all to think about what kind of a drawing you want to make, and then I want you to do 10 thumbnails working out that one idea into the best way possible. So one thing I want to talk about first is some of you may want to do a narrative drawing. I'm going to let y'all choose what you want on this last drawing. So what I want you to think about is, do you want to do a story, a narrative drawing that tells a story, maybe having characters or, you know, somebody or something that's telling a story? Or do you just want to do a landscape or possibly an interior? Also, what you could do is just an imaginary drawing. Just come up with an idea of how you could break up the space of a picture plane and create random spaces, you know, objects, whatever. But I want you to be as creative as possible on this drawing to come up with the idea and then do 10 thumbnails by Monday with your statement. So basically on a sheet of paper, I just want to see a handwritten couple of sentences or a short paragraph stating what you think is a good drawing, how the artist that you looked up influenced you, and then do 10 thumbnails of an idea so that I can kind of just look at them and see where you're at as far as your planning. Now, when you're doing this, I want you to think about the entire picture plane. I don't care if you do a long, you know, horizontal panoramic style, if you do a square format, if you do just more of a traditional format, whatever you choose, I want to feel like you've used every part of that picture plane. I don't want to see a main object and a bunch of negative space. I want all the space to be activated with something, even if it's just an ambiguous form. Instead of just having, you know, a whole quadrant of your drawing just be a consistent value, I want to see little like allusions to maybe a texture, shadows, maybe, you know, ambiguous forms. I want something in that entire drawing. So basically you can also fix that in your thumbnails. If you've got an idea, think about, well, this has a lot of negative space, but if I zoom in, I can actually crop that and make every part of the image purposeful. So that's what I want to do, is just kind of show you real quick with some thumbnails how to come up with an idea. All right, so what I want to give you is an idea of the way to do a series of thumbnails to work out a really good subject matter. I do a lot of work basically from stacked up photographs. I take photos constantly. I've got, you know, thousands and thousands of photos in different files under different subjects. One of the things I like to work with is actually layering an image of something that's, you know, architectural with organic imagery, and then play with the contrast of those things to make kind of a ambiguous, like you're seeing two different dimensions at once. One's a very, you know, constructed, man-made space, and the other one is a more organic and natural space. And it's kind of like what I've really been into the last couple years. So what I want you to do is think about what do you want to make an art, what kind of drawings do you want to make, and then try to make this last drawing fulfill your own expectations as well as my expectations for what's a good drawing. Thumbnail 1, I'm just going to come up with an idea, and a lot of times I'll just think, okay, what kind of a structure do I want? Do I want it to be on the thirds like this? What I'm going to do now is try to remember one that I was working on about a year ago, and it was basically taking a photograph inside of a building that had a hallway, and that was a very interesting like space. And then I was trying to figure out whether to put a tree or flowers or whatever on top of it. When you're doing perspective, some of you made this mistake. Any vertical has to be parallel to the boundary of the picture plane for it to be believable. So this is the way I'm thinking about that hallway. So that's actually my basic thumbnail design. So all I'm doing in my first thumbnail is just thinking about where do I want the overall structure to be. Now, sometimes what I'll do is think, well, just to see what it would look like, let me do the same design from the opposite standpoint. Actually go like that. And then again, every vertical has to be parallel to the side. I'm not liking this because look at all this extra space out here. I don't know what I would put there to make that purposeful. So even though I like this format, I think this one helps me keep the effect to what I want. Now then, if I'm going to layer something, I could find something that kind of is structured over here. So maybe what I could do, and here comes my third thumbnail. And now I'm just going to kind of do them quick because my mind's starting to go with the creative process. So if I have the hallway coming this way, and these side hallways go this way. If you want to know, this is the McKinney post office off of Highway 75. I took a photograph from there one evening when the light was shining and it was beautiful. So I'm going just from memory. So what I could do is have this be a dominant point in the design. And then what I could do if I'm layering another image, which what I ended up with was flowers. And what I would do is look at the photograph of the hallway, and then I would find a photograph of the flowers I'm wanting to use, and then draw them in with the just using gesture lines. You don't have to be perfect to get them placed in your thumbnails. Just use gesture lines and say, okay, so I'm going to have a dominant flower with maybe a structure right over here, secondary structures over here. So then you've got this is a contrast, and then a secondary contrast, because this is going to be more of a ghost image, and this is going to be a slightly more dominant image. And then what I will do is say, okay, that's a good start. But is that necessarily what I want? So I'm going to then do the same thing going back to this one, but make it a little more vertical. Now the hallway I think is a little wider than that. So that's one of those things that I would work out from my photograph to make sure that I'm getting the cast shadows and everything looking really good. Whoop, that wasn't right. This is the problem, is trying to make it up. I'm not good. And this is one of those things I've tried to make clear to y'all. That's why you always want to find a source to look at. When you make things up, they're going to look made up. So always work from a source to make your drawings believable. So even if you're going to end up stylizing it in the end, at least there's a natural, believable quality to it. So there's that design. And then I could think, okay, if I find my flower, maybe it's better to do that secondary design like this. So here's what I came up with. I ended up actually centering the hallway. The flower grew up from here, and it was actually a couple of roses. So you actually had one rose that I ended up having here, and I actually made, this was actually a roof that had glass ceiling, and so that was see-through. And then I basically made all of this kind of fade out, and I ended up somehow creating this ambiguous space that looked like you were seeing into almost like a jungle down here. This ended up being this rose blooming in the sky. And then here you could kind of see some cloud forms from this. I ended up layering 3 or 4 different things. I had cloud forms here, and these looked like you could see through the pillars of the columns. And then off into the distance, you could see trees growing. And all of this had shadows being cast. So that's what I ended up with. I actually decided to center it because it made a very formal design. Personally, I like asymmetrical design where you're working on one of the thirds and you kind of shift everything back and forth. But I found out that on this design, I really liked having that, centralized structure. And then I just looked at the photos and once I had everything drawn in, I started looking to say, okay, I'm going to establish highlights to make the flower stand out, but still be ghostly. So you could see through the flower, and the hallway at the end was actually, I ended up making it dark so that it's like you were having to see that this hallway seemed like a closed in space, but everywhere else was like this other world that you could see around it. I mean, obviously I was being a little bit of in the spiritual expression on that, but I really liked the design. And so I had one rose here that was very red and, dominant, contrasted with this. And of course, this was casting a strong shadow. These were casting shadows. And actually, I changed the angle of the sun so that instead of everything just being up and down, these shadows started casting at an angle a little bit. And then this was a ghostly rose that looked like it was built out of clouds. But that's basically what I want y'all to think about. How do you start with an idea, either from a photograph or a place that you're observing, or even just an idea? And how do you go through these steps to arrive at your final idea for a drawing? And if you want to work from photographs, just realize that it's hard to hold your phone and see all the detail. So that's why if you've got a thumbnail and you get it all sketched in real loosely, just so you know where placements are, then you can zoom in and really study, okay, on this rose, how do these petals actually, fold over? Where's the shadow on those? So that's what I want you to realize, is that you can work from photographs as long as you've got everything really figured out in your thumbnails. So by Monday, I want you to write a statement up here of what you consider to be a good drawing, and the artist that you looked up, how does that play into your idea of a good drawing? And then go through at least 10, even if they're just different. So on this one, what I could do is say, okay, what if I make it even more vertical? What if I just get rid of this extra space and really bring it in to where what I'm seeing ends up being even more dramatic, centralized, so I'm not even seeing any of the secondary space. So that's another consideration. Maybe that's what I did wrong on my first drawing, is that these areas I was just trying to make it do something because I had it there, and that's what, this part of the original painting was actually not bad. I really liked it. It's just that all this extra space, I was just struggling to make it do something, and I got a little carried away with experimenting with different painterly techniques. So that's why doing thumbnails in the first place is a lot of times when you'll come up with an even better idea. But anyway, that's just basically the idea. I want to see you do this, and I will have that set for Monday.